please let us know about yourself, how you got into blockchain, and a little bit of your experience in this space so far.
Yeah, I was actually, prior to blockchain, I did one of the first online trading platforms in the world on the internet back in the late 90s. So wow. I see a few parallels from that, and it went well for Saxo Bank, which was my project, and since then, of course, you're always looking for the next big thing. So I have a little army of people that keep me aware of interesting things. So I actually spotted Bitcoin fairly early on due to these good people that thought it was interesting. So I probably followed Bitcoin since about 2011, 2012. So relatively early start, but mostly as a enthusiast at the time. So I bought a few Bitcoin, and I knew the Ethereum guys before they launched, and followed the space, but had my day job as a co-CEO of my investment bank. So it's kind of just an interest. Mm-hmm. Due to that day job, we were constantly inundated with new regulation and new rules and new laws. You know, I had some problems reconciliating that with what I was seeing in the embryonic blockchain space, where, you know, the ideological point of departure was, you know, we want to get the state out of our hair, we want to do things in freedom, etc., which you can definitely sympathize with, but I also became fairly convinced that we would see a similar regulatory development in this space sooner or later, and while that was not a particularly popular message back in 16, 17, you know, I think most people are beginning to realize that that regulation is coming, and will have impact on the industry. It'll make some things more complicated, but it will also create a framework that will allow more mainstream players to adopt it. And overall, I think we should see that as a positive for the industry, because once there's a framework in place, then it's much easier for bigger players to get involved, and that's exactly what we saw in internet trading, etc., 25 years ago. So that was kind of my angle, that I thought changes were coming to this industry, and hence I started Concordium back in late 17. Got the thought there to take what's truly great about the blockchain space, you know, the decentralization, the no single points of failure, much more efficient transactions in a properly construed blockchain, which all things we lacked in the TradFi industry, right? But at the same time, trying to combine that with respect for society around us, and the obvious requirements that this society will eventually have on this industry. Most notably, I thought the widespread anonymity in the early generations, and for that matter, later generations too. Maybe it's not so obvious if you never tried anything else, but if you've been sitting in the TradFi industry, it's just 100% sure that will not be allowed in the long run, right? Because there's a reason that you have to ID and KYC your clients, you know, to counteract the criminality, terror financing, money laundering, etc. And for me, that was pretty obvious. So I guess apart from wanting to build a really solid blockchain based on real cryptographic science and understanding of cryptography, sort of more building tech the way I was used to from Saxo Bank, where we have maybe 700, 800, 900 technology people, combining that with compliance readiness and a welcoming approach to that, rather than sort of trying to skirt it all the time. Was the reason to start Concordium, and the main reason to start it, because I think even back then in late 17, there's probably a couple of thousand blockchains. So unless you didn't have a USP or some particular angle, there was no point. But that was the angle, and I still think is the angle that there's just a natural desire for people to have some accountability, and also be able to ID each other when they're interacting in future metaverses, and gaming and gambling, etc. You know, that there's a natural need for businesses to ID people as well, and so we try to find a balance between a self-sovereign ID and a possibility to control your ID better than we do in current social media, etc., but also the possibility to actually securely identify yourself towards other people that you want to interact with. So that's kind of the idea behind Concordium, and I think because I have a sort of fairly deep foot in both camps, having been involved in blockchain for more than 10 years, or at least follow it, and having 3 decades or more in the TradFi space, I thought it was quite obvious to combine the two, and that's what we are seeking to do.
Definitely. And like you're saying, that background of the traditional finance and blockchain, especially getting in as early as you did with blockchain, right? You have a lot of experience in the game where people are in blockchain for a couple of years and they feel like they're veterans, right? Because of the way
exactly.
Right, you'll have a bull and a bear market in literally months. So right, that background is, I think it's obviously it's different than what we see, right? Blockchain based on science, which is right. It's available, like you were saying, it's for people, for the common person, whoever wants to use it. But then it's also really great for big banks, like your past experience, other large companies, because all that is needed on many different layers, like logistically, of course, on a self-sovereign level as well. But yes, speaking specifically with the gaming industry, how do you view, I know we were talking about regulation coming in, and I'm assuming, like you said, that's a positive, and now it's time for these big companies and even gaming companies to get into this space. And how do you see Concordium being able to help out some of these gaming firms, some of these, whether it's a firm, it's a game, it's the player, and maybe are they implementing the CCD token, and just in which ways can Concordium help out in the gaming sphere?
I see us as a piece of infrastructure, right? It's not our job to build the games, or there are many great game publishers and game producers out there, and obviously that environment is still infinitely much bigger than the crypto environment. I think we estimate there's about 3 billion gamers in the world, right? So it's a very large community, and it's largely done by a game publisher that publishes a great game. People like it, they get in and play it. The in-game economics are controlled by the publisher, and of course, for that very reason, there's actually a considerable pushback from the big gaming publishers to really embrace blockchain and tokenomics, etc. Right, and that's very understandable. If you're sitting on an in-game economy and you can print the machine guns and the swords and the whatever you want, then that's a nice position to have. I think, on the other hand, for gamers, it's probably less comfortable, because there you have exactly an example of a single point of failure. The game could go under, the publisher could be abusing his position. Accidents could happen to the database. You can get hacked. There are many things that can go wrong, seen from the gamer's perspective. So if you're spending good money in a game on buying in-game tools and various things you need for that game, I think you should welcome an introduction of blockchain as a piece of infrastructure. Because what is a blockchain when you cut away all the hype and all the buzz? It's a database, right? It's just a very secure database because of the distributed nature and the lack of one central controlling entity that can manipulate that or delete stuff by mistake or get hacked, etc. So for me, really, you can easily run a game without a blockchain, and you can easily run a metaverse without a blockchain. And it's very typical of this industry to sort of jump on everything that's particularly blockchain related. But we've had metaverses for decades without any thinking of blockchain. Where blockchain becomes relevant, is where you have something in the game that you want to secure, that you have assets in there that you purchase. You want to be sure that you have the ownership of that assets in a future world, maybe be able to transfer them to other games, get much more control of what you're spending your money on. And I think that's key. Who owns what? That's exactly what a blockchain does. And it's not dependent on on the game publisher's database. It can't be manipulated the same way in a well-constructed blockchain. The other thing is that if you add our ID layer, you can know who you're dealing with. You can know who you're buying and selling various in-game items from. You can see the road that those items have traveled, etc., by registrations on the blockchain. So I think that gamers should be very excited about this opportunity to give them a more secure status in various games. But I also, of course, as I said, understand the pushback. If you're already owning that economy, why would you want to change that? And it's not much different from the argument that's often being raised against banks. Why would banks want a new angle to monetary systems? I don't quite agree with that, because I think banking and financial services can benefit tremendously from this also. But that pushback by the incumbent is actually the same in a gaming company, right? So I understand the skepticism from some game publishers, but I don't understand sometimes when you hear the gamers themselves maybe have an aversion to this, because as I see it, it's just giving them a much more secure life, much more control over what they actually spend their in-game tokenomics on, right? Another thing is that some games, and certainly the gambling industry, if you see that as a related industry, you need age control. You need to be able to prove that you maybe need jurisdictional control. Is this person from a country where this activity is allowed? Is that person over 18 or whatever the limit might be? Also in play-to-earn games, where a sad effect of some of these highly publicized games, that they help the third world generate profits, etc. Well, the sad story is that it also creates child factories where people are still only paid $1 a day to sit and generate the in-game assets. So I think there's a lot to be said for a more secure environment for this, and that's what we're trying to provide.
Definitely, yeah, and that as well, right? That ID layer, it adds, of course, the ability to be synonymous, right? Still have a layer of anonymity while knowing who it is, but also security. Like you said, a lot of things, as we know, kind of going back to my conversation with Loam for a second, like a lot of what we interact with on the internet is fake, right? They say like 60% of it, and only like 40% is actual human interactions. It's these bots and all these people using these tools and whatnot. So I mean, that's kind of like a weird thing to think of, especially because of how that's evolved so quickly. When, like 10 years ago, I remember being in high school when social media even came out, and that was, like the craziest thing in the world. But now it's elevated to the point. Of course, we didn't have like robots and all these things that aren't real on the internet because nobody was really even using the internet. But now, like 10 years later, it's almost completely, it's not even 50-50, right? 60-40. So that identity layer is so important. And also,
I think it's very, I fully agree. I think we have to distinguish between anonymity and privacy, right? Because a human has the right for privacy if that person is not doing something criminal or stuff that is forbidden by a law or mandate, right? So that balance doesn't exist today, right? You have anonymity. Anybody can make a fake profile in a social media, and it happens all the time. I have a fairly big social media following, so I'm apparently interesting enough that somebody wants to create fake profiles of me. Sometimes they pull down my picture, they take down my CV, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there and I'm handing out, free Bitcoin if you sent me $100 first, that kind of thing, right? and this happens again and again. I mean, I think I've corrected that dozens of times, and you have to find a group of friends that will go and report the profile, and if you're lucky, they take it down within 24 hours. I mean, a lot of risk factors there for people to get duped or to get abused, right? So that whole thing about ID goes across so many levels, as you're saying. Also, if you're buying an NFT and you're buying it from one anonymous Ethereum account to another, how can you know that it's not just people manipulating and pushing up the market until you come in as the last fool and buy an inflated price, you know. So there's a lot of intellectual property right that gets stolen and sold by anonymous accounts to naive people, right? So it has a lot of applications, but at the same time, I think it's important to stress the right to privacy. So what we're developing is actually a balance between that. You know, you get an ID, and that ID is trustworthy and proven by actors that typically do such things between citizens and its public sector, for example, right? But it's still your private ID, right? So you can choose whether you want to release some of the information or not. For example, if you and I meet in a game or metaverse and we get talking, that might be fine. We might not need to. It's like if we met in a bar, you know, I'm not going to ask to see your passport, right? But if we end up doing a business transaction or something, you know, then maybe you do want to know who I am, right? And then you can ask me, well, Lars, if I'm going to buy this in-game item or NFT or whatever from you, well, I'd like to just know who you are, right? And I can then say, well, I'll tell you who I am. I'm from this country. That's my name. I'm over 18. Whatever you want to know, right? And then you can know that what I'm telling you is the truth, right? I can also choose not to give it to you, but then of course you can say, well, you know, you might be lost, but I'm not gonna send you any tokens or do a transaction with you if you don't want to identify, right? So it's also creating that degree of privacy that of course we don't flash your ID everywhere, and you might not need to know all of an ID, right? For example, with zero knowledge, you have these things called range proofs. You know, you don't have to admit that you're 59 like I am. You know, if I just need to tell people that I'm over 18 and I'm from Denmark and not from Sweden, I can prove that to you without giving the full ID. So, you know, if your daughter goes down to the local kiosk to buy a bottle of wine, you know, she doesn't need to give her full name, her full age, her home address, her social security number, and whatever else is in normal ID documents. She just needs to prove she's over 18. And this you can do with a range proof, and so there's this privacy where you can control the attributes of your ID the way that you feel appropriate, unless of course you do something criminal and there's a court order for that information, then it can be provided under stringent set of rules, right? But in normal interaction, which I think is generally will be used much more and is much more valuable, is for you and me to be able to trust each other also in a virtual environment, right? And that's kind of where we're coming from. Whereas you look at many of the chains today, you have two anonymous counterparties. Everything they do is completely transparent, and you can see everything they do. Where I think in that scenario, you'll have to have some privacy, right? So it's a little bit like everybody looking into your bank account. That wouldn't be reasonable either, right? So the flip side of that is actually to have two ID parties, knowing that they're ID'd, because otherwise they couldn't be in the system to begin with, and then be able to do certain transactions in private if that's your desire, right? So I think the whole space needs to be flipped a little bit, 180 degrees to accountability, but privacy, right? This is the sort of place we're trying to take it, and I think it has applications way beyond gaming, but also in social media and any kind of online commerce, etc., metaverses, gambling industry, open, obviously, you know, many places where it makes a lot of sense to have the ability to identify yourself with certainty, right?
Yes, and we'll also go thinking about what Lone was mentioning, and like you were certainly mentioning here. It's like creating a digital twin, right? You can have something that is in the metaverse, in a game, and then also in real life. So it adds another layer of utility, and it could be for a whole host of things, like we're talking, right? Logistically, but specifically in the gaming space, right? In the metaverse, as we know, as we were talking about, there's so much fake stuff going on, people being paid to do certain things that in the gaming space, that's really necessary these days, right? Thinking again 10 years ago when I was really into gaming, and gaming wasn't as big as a thing, but with the rise of social media as well, right? And now people are getting paid to play video games, right? They're getting paid big bucks too, right? People that are doing this for a living. So tell us what you see the future of this gaming space, the metaverse, the blockchain gaming space, and then right, how you see that evolving, and then of course how maybe CCD can lend a hand and help secure or add another layer to this whole space that's evolving very rapidly.
Yeah, I think the whole thing will merge over time, right? I think it's a foregone conclusion. I think that with technology getting better, virtual environments will get more and more attractive for all sorts of things, for gaming, for gambling, for dating, for commercial purposes, for whatever, people coming together in a virtual environment. In fact, we already have it. I mean, this is kind of in a virtual environment, right? You're sitting in Connecticut, I'm sitting in Copenhagen, right? So without technology just 20 years ago, we couldn't have done this, right? So we're already there. Now it's just getting refined with better and better technology, and clearly gaming and metaverse and online commerce and all sorts of virtual environments will slowly but surely converge towards some kind of virtual reality where we will spend a significant amount of our time, because there are things that are definitely more efficient, maybe more fun, maybe more interesting than our daily lives, so people will spend a considerable amount of time, make a lot of their purchases in here, meet a lot of their friends and social relationships through this, some people my own age, my generation, say, oh, that's terrible, you need to meet in the street, or you need to play a physical sport or whatever, right? But I don't think so. I think it's just as valid, just as real, actually, as technology progresses. Of course, there's still things you will, for the foreseeable future at least, prefer to do outside of the virtual reality, but I see it all converging more and more, right? Now, of course, there's one problem with that, and that is that if you don't have some of those security measures in place that we've been discussing, it's a lot easier to fake things in a metaverse than if we meet on the street, right? I mean, I could go down. In a metaverse, I could claim to be Beyonce, but if you met me in real life, you probably wouldn't really believe that, right? So that's some of the challenges that this creates. The possibility to also, and of course, when there's a possibility to commit fraud, some people will do it, right? And some people will get very, very skilled at it, right? So there, I think what the only real thing we're trying to provide is to provide that piece of infrastructure that can make such environments safer, more trustworthy, which will also benefit these, because if it only ever is fun and games and we never can do a transaction because we don't trust each other, well, then there's going to be a limit to how far we can take this. But having a solid infrastructure where if need be, we can know who we're dealing with, we can transact efficiently, we can share whatever information is appropriate for the transaction that we contemplate, and then of course some regulatory framework that kind of makes it a level playing field, so that we have some standards, right? I think it'll be enormously beneficial for this area rather than being something negative. Sometimes regulation goes overboard and it becomes sort of cover my backside things for the regulator, but by and large, what they're trying to do is to create a safer environment for people, so particularly with regards to financial transactions, obviously, right? So I basically see this whole thing merging. I really hope to stay alive to see where we are 30 or 40 years from now, because I think we'll have tremendous virtual experiences to supplement our daily life, and much earlier than that. But I'm really looking forward to just thinking how it could be one day in the future, in the far further future, where you have sound and smell and taste and everything involved in these metaverses, and I imagine an extremely lifelike experience where all of a sudden you don't have to go down to Miami or to Gran Canaria for holiday. You can go to Venus or Mars, right? And I think this will be I think this will be very cool, and I'm going to stick around for as long as possible to experience some of it.
For sure, for sure. I mean, yeah, as we know, it's evolving so quickly. A lot of people are afraid of it, like you were saying. I know plenty of people that are afraid of like the metaverse and blockchain and all these things. It's like these like crazy code words that they're not familiar with, and yeah, it seems kind of scary, but it's like riding a bike. Once you get used to it, it's very simple. So it's one of those things where it's education is one of the most important things, and I think personally, gaming is one of the ways to help people get into that, right? You can play, a simple game, like a Satoshi or 10 Satoshis, and then you earn yada yada, right? Spin a wheel, and there's plenty of spaces in crypto right now for that, right? That are bringing that like fun element to get into this blockchain space. And I like we both know, obviously, you've been in the space for a while. I have as well. We certainly know that this is something that it's going to be a part of our future. It's not, it's like the, Web3, as they say. It sounds very confusing for many people, but really, I think the essence of what Concordium is, right? It's that layer that allows us to communicate with people in real time with verification, whether it's Connecticut to Copenhagen, it's the rural part of a desert to a bustling city, right? It brings that element of connectivity and transfer of value and whatnot that's needed.
And I think we will have fuller lives due to that, right? When I grew up as a kid, we didn't have much, right? We had a football and a few things we could do, and kids today have much greater opportunities. There's some risks for sure, but it's just a much fuller experience, right? I mean, just the amount of entertainment you can have on your iPhone today is tremendous compared to having a couple of Flow TV channels you could watch back then, right? So I think it'll improve life very significantly, right? And give everyone an opportunity to have great experiences. Not all people can afford to take expensive holidays, but they can get something that's close enough. I think in however many years. I actually think it's going to accelerate, so I don't think you have to wait enormously long time. But I think it's a great, this like most technology that is not used for bad purposes. It's something that enhances people's lives, and the ability everybody walks around already today with in their phone, in their pocket for finding information, for getting entertainment. I mean, it's completely different to what the situation was in the 70s or the 80s, right? You already have so much more opportunity, and then you can worry about a few things that are not so great. But by and large, it's huge improvements, and it will only accelerate in my view from here. So what the only real concern here is these risk factors, that it's easier to pretend to be somebody else. So as long as you remember that part, and if you want to deselect it somehow, you can do it at your own risk. But I think the vast majority of people will want this. And then, of course, as you said, there's a lot of buzzwords, a lot of hype, and a lot of complexity or perceived complexity around this. But to be honest, a blockchain is not very difficult to understand, right? In fact, I would much rather explain a blockchain than the intricacies of how the internet works. Much more complicated, right? But we lack maybe the tools for easy access, right? We lack something that bridges us into this universe in as easy as possible way. And again, that's normal for new technology. I've seen the internet before we had browsers. That wasn't a lot of fun. You had to be a real nerd to do anything on the internet until these tools came later in the process, right? And it's the same thing here. We need some easier access so people don't sort of say, hey, I can't understand this, so I'm not going to get involved at all. But these things will also come naturally, because there's a lot of upside and a lot of economic benefits for the people that will provide such access points to this. So these things will be solved. It's only a question of how long, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they really are coming along, as we're talking about, right? Those companies that are giving out small incentives, teaching people about crypto and blockchain, right? That's what we're seeing. And I mean, incentives run the world, right? So that's really how you're going to bring people in and teach people that in actuality, blockchain makes things much more personal when you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you're probably talking to a whole bunch of scammers that live who knows where, right? So, but when you know how to look up on-chain data, right? You know how to do cold storage, have a hard wallet, have a cold wallet, do all these different things, right? You really realize how secure it is.
It should be so easy that you don't even think about using these things, right? We're sitting here having a Zoom call or a Google Team call or whatever, right? And we don't sit and think about the technology behind that. We just know you show up on the screen, you can speak to me, I show up on the screen at your end, and you can speak, I can speak to you, right? I mean, we don't need to understand the underlying technology, which I'm sure is pretty complex, right? But we know how it works because we've done it a few times. Incidentally, I forgot, but I very much agree with your point about gamification. You know, this is a great way to engage people. I think also I'm involved in a couple of educational projects, and to get people to really understand things, they need to think that it's fun, you know, and to entice people to even want to learn. Sometimes it's a cool thing if you can gamify it, and at the same time people still get the knowledge, maybe even more knowledge than sitting reading a boring book or something like that, because their mind will go away after a short while if they're just reading a boring piece of information, right? Whereas gamification, where you get involved, you get maybe a little reward for getting something right, I think has a place also in traditional education, and of course also for getting people engaged here, you know, that could be one of the very valuable tools.
Yes, and is that part of what you all are doing in your Concordium Community Endowment Program? Are you guys teaching? I believe Lone mentioned that you guys are using Rust. Are you also talking about maybe the gamification, or how CCD could be implemented in the metaverse and blockchain gaming and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think we very much want to work with people that can help this happen, right? I mean, our key focus is building a really great blockchain with great scientific research, solid, scalable, with the ID layer, with incidentally, which we haven't really touched upon, but not many blockchains have true finality. There's still a risk of rollbacks and stuff like that. So, but creating a great blockchain, that's our number one objective. But it's right that we have a grant program. I actually have a separate private grant program for people that want to build some of this tooling and help make it easier to work with it. So yeah, out there listening, and they have a great idea for a use case or a great idea for a tool, you know, reach out, and we'll see if we can make it happen together, right? Because at the end of the day, that the input from a larger community will always give you at least more perspective on things than you sitting in a ivory tower deciding how everything should be. I mean, that's the nature of the decentralized space. So by all means, we are very willing and to look at supporting people that can help us all go in the right direction.
Yes, right. And as we know, we need as many people as possible in this blockchain space to, right, each one teach one. I'm trying to help as many people as possible. Just, I'm not trying to go tell them to buy a crypto. It's learn what it is first, right? Learn what a blockchain is, because you got to know what blockchain is before you get into cryptocurrency, right? So I mean, yeah, that's really where it all is. It's educating people, getting as many people in the space as we can possible from all different avenues. Like, I know almost everybody I talk to that works in crypto has come from some totally different space. Like I was into nonprofits and a little bit of political work, and then discovered crypto and how that could help those same entities. You know, kind of like how we were talking about how a secure blockchain layer can help with security on the internet. Right? Unfortunately, there's so much, as we've already talked about, but there's a lot of fraud and a lot of unfortunate things that happen on the internet. So this is very important technology. It's clearly going to be a part of our futures. And it's great that you guys are doing awesome stuff to educate people and also do it in a fun way, right? Through gaming, through gaming, through games, which is probably the most fun thing that we can do, right? It's relatable to us being adolescents. So one more question before I let you go. Please let us know a little bit about, it was last year you guys had these chess NFTs, right? The Play Magnus group. So yeah, just please let us know a little bit about that, because that's interesting to see already kind of a real life element. We always hear about gaming online, or excuse me, blockchain gaming and NFTs, but you guys, I'm assuming that was a real chess tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Magnus Carlsen, who is the current world champion in chess, is actually very, very interested in this space and quite knowledgeable about it. So this is an ongoing project we have with him and actually through his group, a number of other chess masters. Chess has changed a lot. People think chess is for like really old guys sitting up on Iceland in the Cold War and that kind of thing, right? But chess is something that has really rejuvenated itself. You get hundreds of thousands of people watching chess TV and then arguing about it like it's a football match. It's quite fun to see. But new formats with very rapid chess and stuff like that. So apparently about 600 million people in the world play chess, right? And so it's a lot. It's a very inclusive sport. You don't need a game. You don't really need very much to play a game of chess, right? You can get an old battered chessboard for 50 cents somewhere, right? So it's an inclusive sport, and a very good sport for your mind, right? So I think that we would like to support, and I think that has a value in itself. But there's certainly also ways whereby people can have more fun doing it. And I think it's interesting that these classic games, can find their way to blockchain and give added value and more fun aspects. So. But Magnus there is actually a real believer in the blockchain and very interested in the NFT space, etc. So it's not something, it's not like somebody comes and just puts a lot of money in front of a sports club and let's see if we can get something out of the hype. He has a genuine interest, and he has some really good commercial people around him also that wants to develop chess in many ways, and this is just one of them, right?
Yeah. That's awesome to see that those two worlds coming together, right? We've seen it a little bit with some sports, bigger groups. You see the sponsorships on some of the jerseys, and of course, Crypto.com bought Staples Center Arena. But yeah, it's great to finally see this coming together, as we're saying, right? Regulations coming in. It finally seems like people are embracing it more, and we're bringing that education as well, and with the games, with the fun part as well.
Sorry, all these big sponsorships, are natural. Product, you want to promote it, you have some money in the bank, you go stick your name on whatever you can stick it on, right? And then all respect for that, all respect, but that is just from many of the clubs, and I know that space a little bit, and I've been involved with sport for many years, and the financing and sponsorship in sport. And much of this is just a quick money grab. Let's try this. We read in the paper, people made a lot of money, so we also want a lot of money, right? What I like about the chess thing is that there's a real involvement, a real interest from the greatest chess player in the world, right? And that gives it perhaps some more longevity than just a quick cash grab from a sports club that's not otherwise interested, right?
Yeah, that is true, right? At the bottom line, part of the reason we are seeing a bit of adoption at the institutional level is, like you're saying, they're here for the money, right? They're here for the shovels, right? That's what they're buying. So, but it's the genuine connection, the people that really understand it, that we certainly want to see more of. And like Concordium, like you're saying with Magnus, the people that they're not there for the money, they're there for teaching people how this is actually bringing the world together, and people much more being able to connect on a much more personal level. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you again, Lars. And
thank you.
Please let us know where we can follow you and some of your Concordium pages and whatnot.
Yeah, you can always check up on Concordium on our homepage, www.concordium.com. We got Twitter, Telegram, all the usual places, right? And my own name, I don't know, it's a complicated Danish name, but Lars Seier Christensen. I am also across most of these platforms. So if you want to follow a little bit my thoughts on this, you're very welcome to do so. And I'd appreciate any input or feedback or commentary that you have for what we're trying to do, because we want to hear people's good ideas.
Without a doubt. Thank you so much, Lars. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.